The desert evening stretched endlessly across the horizon, the sky washed in deep strokes of amber and violet as the last light slipped. Behind Red Mesa, Ethan McGraw, known across the frontier as a quiet drifter with a wounded but gentle heart, rode slowly along a trail that seemed carved only by fate. He had spent years wandering across lonely country, chasing nothing but silence and the ghost of a past he never talked about. But that night, beneath the twisted limbs of a storm-beaten juniper tree, something broke the stillness. A small Apache girl sat curled into herself, dust streaked across her cheeks, dried tears clinging to her skin. In her tiny hands she held a broken piece of cedar, gripping it the way someone clings to the last memory of someone they love. Ethan slid off his horse and knelt beside her. She flinched at first, a startled, wild little thing ready to bolt. But the moment his shadow softened over her, she sensed the gentleness in him. Slowly, she allowed herself to be lifted into his arms. As thunder rumbled across the far mountains, she pressed her face into his chest. Something long dormant inside Ethan woke with a fierce, protective fire, something he hadn't felt since he was a boy. He wrapped her in his weather-worn duster, mounted his horse, and rode toward shelter as the storm rolled in. Rain hammered against his hat brim, urging him onward. The night grew so cold it froze breath in the air, but Ethan kept her warm, holding her close. Just before she drifted into sleep, she whispered her name. Ta? By the time Ethan reached his cabin at the edge of Red Canyon, the storm had turned the desert into a river of shadows and lightning. Warm firelight spilled from the cabin windows like an old memory calling him home. Inside, he fed her broth, cleaned the cuts on her feet, and laid her near the fire. Slowly, her breathing steadied. Slowly, dawn returned to the world. When she opened her eyes in the morning dark, bright and full of ancient innocence, she told Ethan her story. Her mother had vanished during a night raid. Ta had wandered alone for days, terrified of coyotes and the endless loneliness of the open land. Her words cracked something inside Ethan. He knew too well what it was like to be left behind. Without hesitation, he saddled his horse, lifted Ta into his arms, and began the long ride toward Apache territory. His heart thumped with responsibility, uncertainty, and something new he couldn't name. As they neared the tribal encampment, Apache warriors stepped forward with raised bows and hard, unreadable eyes. But when Ta leaned back and clutched Ethan's arm, trusting him completely, the warriors exchanged surprised glances instead of threats. The chief approached, a man carved from wisdom and years. When he saw Ta alive, his stern expression softened like clay under warm hands. Ethan slowly dismounted and set Ta on her feet, but she didn't run to them. She held Ethan's hand tight, afraid he might disappear if she let go. And then her mother appeared. Ayana stepped out from the lodge, moving with the quiet grace of dawn sliding across still water. Her long raven hair flowed past her shoulders. Her eyes, deep, firelit, beautiful, held a sorrow shaped by storms and survival. The moment she saw Ta, a cry escaped her, half prayer, half disbelief. She ran forward and fell to her knees, gathering her daughter into her arms. Ethan looked away, swallowing the lump in his throat, but Ayana rose again and approached him. Tears still clung to her lashes, yet she stood with the dignity of a woman rebuilt by the land itself. She thanked him not with simple gratitude, but with a depth and weight that words alone could barely hold. She understood exactly what he had risked, crossing tribal lines with nothing but honesty and a child in his arms. The chief invited Ethan to stay for a feast in his honor. Normally, Ethan preferred lonely nights and open skies. But when Ayana looked at him with hopeful eyes and softly said, "It would bring peace to our hearts if you stayed," he found himself unable to refuse. So he stayed. As the fire crackled, drums echoed through the canyon, and stars unfolded like a woven blanket across the heavens, Ayana sat beside him. She told him stories of her people's ancient traditions, sacred paths, old songs, and the grief she had carried since losing her husband seasons ago. Ta leaned her little head against Ethan's arm. She held her mother's hand with one hand and his with the other, as though he had already become part of her world in ways none of them fully understood. And Ethan felt a warmth he hadn't known in years, something deeper than gratitude, more powerful than destiny. When Ayana shifted closer to keep Ta warm, her hand brushed Ethan's. That faint touch echoed straight through him. He suddenly realized, all his wandering years, the frontier had given him nothing but solitude, yet here among a people he did not belong to, beside a woman whose presence quieted storms within him, with a child who saw him as the safest place in the world. He felt something he had never felt before, belonging, as firelight danced across Ayana's face, casting her in a glow that looked like a future he never imagined. Ethan understood one truth. Finding Ta in the wilderness had never been an accident. It was the beginning of everything. Thank you for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure. We'll see you again soon.